Hey guys, it's Eli here with Eli's Naturals, and this week I want to cover what is the third step in choosing your herb. And most people would say this is the most important step. I mean, there are a lot of herbalists out there that basically they use herbal actions as the one and only criteria for choosing an herb. I mean, yeah, you start with your organ system, but then you go straight to actions. And once they figure out the herbal action they want, they kind of stop the process. And if that's your way, that's okay. It's up to you whether or not you want to do the tastes and the energetics, which we will cover next week. But today I do want to talk about herbal actions. So, what is an herbal action? Well, like the name suggests, it's literally what the herb does in the body. Now, for some of this, I know this is where people get really confused and really frustrated. They want to have me just tell them what is an herb good for. But herbs go farther than that. Herbal actions is the important step. It's asking the question of what do I want the herb to do? What action am I giving it? And here is where the question of what is an herb good for kind of defeats the herbal action, because herbs have so many properties. It's like me. Yes, I'm an herbalist, but that is only one definition of who I am. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a homeschool mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a CrossFitter. All of these words are words that you would use to describe me. And depending on what situation I'm in would depend on which one of those words would best suit me. Well, herbs are the same way. You can have an herb that can have more than one action, and that action can solve more than one problem. This is where one herb can do a multitude of things. You can have an herb that can be digestive and carminative and respiratory all at the same time, or cardiac, all at the same time, because of the action it's doing, because of what it's doing for the body. And I know this is where a lot of people feel like they get lost. Like, I don't have that kind of training. I don't understand actions. But you kind of do. If, yeah, they're big, they're fancy words. But if you understand what they mean, then you can simply ask yourself, just like you did with taste, is this what I want the herb to do? What is the problem I'm trying to solve? That is truly when you see the beauty of the herb. What is the problem I'm trying to solve? And I know a lot of you would say, well, isn't that asking what is an herb good for? But it's not, because asking what is an herb good for is putting a label on it, and you're narrowing it very, very slightly. It would be like me saying ginger is a good carminative herb. There you go. I have labeled ginger. So in other words, I am telling you that ginger is good for gas and belching. That's what I'm telling you. Okay, but ginger is also antimicrobial. It is also a bitter. It is also, I've used it, it's a nervine. I've used it to calm things. So when you narrow down to what is an herb good for, you're taking all of those things out of the math. Going back to me, if I tell you I'm just a mom, okay, well, number one, any mom out there would find that phrase, the way I said it, kind of insulting, because we all know that moms are so much more. I mean, we are, you name it, we are it. Herbs are the same way. You got to think in broader terms. You got to think about, what am I wanting to do? I want a mom, sure, because I want that loving, nurturing way that somebody takes care of my children. That means I'm a cook sometimes. That means I'm a chauffeur sometimes. I'm a shoulder to cry on. And I'm a disciplinarian. I am all those things, all wrapped up in the word mom. Well, an herb has the same ability. That's where you have to look past what is an herb good for. Look at its actions. Look at its abilities. Look at the beauty that God gave it. When you say that an herb is a diaphoretic, which means an herb makes you sweat. Okay, sounds like a pretty simple thing. Sure, an herb makes me sweat. Big deal. until you go back to like the 1800s when you had Thomsonian medicine, and he was literally helping people with scarlet fever because he was making them sweat. When you have somebody who has a fever illness and they need to sweat, they need to get all of that stuff out of their body. Now diaphoretic sounds really, really helpful. Now it sounds like it's a really cool thing to have. Or when you are in toxic overload and your body needs to release that stuff. You know, that's why saunas are so big, because we need to sweat. That is why exercise can be good for you, because it makes you sweat. I mean, there's a lot of other ways exercise can be good for you, but from a detoxing process, exercise can be a diaphoretic. It makes you sweat. And when you sweat, your body is getting all that crap out of its system. Now, when I use the word diaphoretic, now it's a really cool thing. Just like when you think about all the different things that moms do, now all of a sudden we're really cool people. Okay. So, one of the things I want to talk about before we talk about some of the major actions, and that's when an action isn't. This is where herbalists and herb books kind of get a little iffy, because a lot of times if you go to an herb book and you look up an herb, underneath it you'll see the word actions. But then you'll see words like hepatic, cardiac. Those are not actions, those are organs. Hepatic is liver. If an herb is hepatic, that means it has an affinity for the liver. It's not an action. If an herb is cardiac, now it's telling you it has an affinity for the heart, not its action. Now, if I say cardiac stimulant, now it's telling me an action, because now it's telling me that it stimulates the heart. So be very careful, because those are two of them that we love to throw around. We love to throw around organ affinities as actions. And while it's important, if you want a hepatic herb, you want an herb for the liver, that's great. But you still have to ask yourself, what do I want it to do in the liver? If I'm looking for a heart, or going back to organ affinity, seeing the word cardiac, that's going to tell me it has an organ affinity for the heart. But I still have to ask myself, what do I want it to do to my heart? Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to talk about some of the major herbal actions. I've got a list. We're going to go through them. And I brought my list so I don't forget them, because you know how that goes. Okay, so first one is probably the most common thing that's being thrown around here, and in truth, it's being thrown around in the wrong way. And that is the word adaptogen. Adaptogen is, everybody wants adaptogens. Ginseng became the hot topic because it's an adaptogen. But here's the problem where adaptogens come into. This is where we're misusing adaptogens. People think adaptogens cause you to have more energy, and they don't. What adaptogens do is they help the body to handle stress. And when they help the body to handle stress, yes, that can give you more energy, because your body is not overloaded in stress. Look at it this way. Adaptogens, when you're highly stressed, now they won't make the stress go away. They're not going to keep you from getting stressed. What they're going to do is they're going to help your stress recovery time. They're going to help your cortisol level stay low. They're going to help how long you feel stressed. They're not going to keep my kids from fighting. What they're going to do is they're going to help me not feel that stress, wired feeling an hour after my kids fight. That is where they bring you more energy, because they keep your cortisol low. They help your bounce back effect. They do all of these things. Okay. So when you want resilience, you want an adaptogen. Now, the next one is another word you don't hear very often, but it's a great word, and that is alterative. I always have a hard time saying it. Alterative. Alteratives restore body function. Used to be they were called blood cleansing, but we have learned in the last few years they actually do more than just cleanse the blood. A lot of times an alternative is what an herbalist is referring to when they're saying a tonic herb. It helps the body function better. These are the kind of herbs that you can take for long periods of time. They can help with function. They help the liver detoxify. They help the lymph nodes to get stuff out. They do help get the stuff out of the blood, which is where your blood cleansing comes into, especially with your lymphatics. They can be antimicrobial, helping the body get rid of, microbes and bacteria and all of those kinds of things. They can help with urine function. They can help all of these systems that help the body function better. So you got to, like I said, this is when we use the word tonic herb. It's overall health, overall improvement. That is an alternative. Okay, the next one is an astringent. An astringent tightens tissue. Think about when you suck on a lemon and everything gets tight and kind of dry. Okay, that is what an astringent does. It strengthens tissue. It helps boggy tissue dry out, but it tightens it up. Trust us, any of us who are getting older in life in some way or form, especially us ladies, we are using an astringent on our faces because we want to tighten up those wrinkles. Okay, that's an astringent. There's 100 different forms of it. Used to be back in the day, before we have all these creams, women used to put lemon juice on their faces. We used to use peroxide and things on our faces because we wanted to tighten them up. Okay, a bitter. Bitter I've discussed before, so I'm not going to go into huge. Bitters improve digestion. They literally help the body create more gastric juices. They help the body digest. They help with all those things. Now, another one that goes hand in hand with a bitter is a carminative. But a carminative is a warming herb. It really helps with flatulence. It really helps with that feeling of heaviness in the gut. That feeling of, have you ever felt like, you ate a meal and it's just sitting so heavy, it's sitting like a rock in your gut. These are the things that a carminative are going to help you do. Okay, so the next one is a cholagogue. I know, that's a big fancy word. Cholagogue literally means it increases bile in the liver. So a cholagogue increases your liver function. So and a lot of times this is where the people cross over. When you see an herbal action and it says it's hepatic, what it's actually telling you is it's a cholagogue. It is meant to increase liver function. And it does that by improving bile function. So cholagogue is the action, hepatic is the location. But a lot of times in a lot of herb books, you see them used interchangeably. Okay, a demulcent. A demulcent it's rich in mucilage. It coats and it soothes. One of my favorite demulcents is marshmallow. Chia seeds can be a demulcent. If you've ever used a chia seed and you let it soak in the water and it gets out all that gooey, gummy stuff, that's its demulcent action. It coats and it soothes. When you take that demulcent in and it touches the respiratory system, it touches the digestive system, it touches the urinary system, it coats it. It puts all that ooey gooey gummy stuff all over the walls of those organs and it soothes them. So the next one we have is diaphoretic, which I've already mentioned. Diaphoretics make you sweat. These are really good when you're ill because you need to help the body get rid of stuff. When you are wanting to detoxify, think diaphoretic. The other one that runs hand in hand with getting rid of stuff is a diuretic. A diaphoretic makes you sweat. A diuretic makes you pee. This is the one that stimulates urine flow, which is another way that the body tries to detoxify. It goes through the whole system and things end up in the kidneys and the urinary system. And this diuretic helps them get rid of it. You also can hear it a lot if you have heart issues. A lot of people use diuretics because diuretics can thin the blood. I do not recommend that, but that it can be a cardiac. If you have a diuretic herb and it says it's a cardiac herb, it is referring to the fact that it's going to increase that urine production. It's going to increase the amount of it's going to thin the blood. Okay, so an emmenagogue. This one is a lady's herb. Literally, when people use the word emmenagogue, they mean it helps with the female reproductive system. Specifically, emmenagogues cause menstruation. But a lot of emmenagogues, because there's a whole system that goes into it. I mean, if you've ever had to study the cycle, we all know there's a whole system that goes into what the end result is. Okay, different emmenagogues affect different parts of that system. So pretty much at this point, an emmenagogue is usually referring to a female reproductive herb. It can also be referring to a male reproductive herb. So that's where you got to pay attention to your organ affinities, because I have seen people referring to herbs that affect the male reproductive system, such as nettle seed, being listed as an emmenagogue. Different system, but they classify it the same way. Okay, and expectorant. This one a lot of people know, especially if you've ever dealt with cough syrup. You see cough syrups that say expectorant, because expectorants they work on the lungs and they help get stuff out. Now here's the caveat. When it comes to an herb, you can have relaxing expectorants and you can have stimulating expectorants. Sometimes an expectorant herb can relax a cough. Doesn't always stimulate the cough. Sometimes it can relax the cough, because sometimes that's what has to happen. Sometimes the bronchioles have to relax because they're so tightly wound, you can't get the stuff up. So if we relax them, then the body has its natural ability to get rid of the mucus and the buildup in the lungs. Next one is a nervine. Nervines are simple. Nervines, anything that affects the nervous system, the central nervous system, the brain, that's a nervine. Now, the next ones are really our actions. And I'm going to talk about two. I've already talked about them, mentioned them a couple of times, but they come big time into play when you talk about nervines, because that is two actions. That is relaxant and stimulant. Now, you can have herbs that are just relaxant herbs. You can have herbs that are just stimulant herbs. But a lot of times, you get them applied somewhere else. And the biggest place you're going to see them is in nervines. Do you want to calm a nerve or do you want to stimulate the nerve? So very seldom will you just see the word nervine. You usually see nervine relaxant or you see nervine stimulant. You will also see the word relaxant by itself or the word stimulant by itself. It's calling them a nervine. Normally, if you see the word relaxant, it's talking about it as a nervine. It's just dropping off the nerve. Now, the other areas, though, that you can have stimulants, another big one is you can have cardiac stimulants and cardiac relaxants. So they are their own action, and they're pretty self-explanatory. But you got to, so whenever you see the nervine, especially, or whenever you see a cardiac herb, especially, stop and ask yourself, do I want to speed it up or do I want to slow it down? Because that is your big difference. Because let me tell you, if you take a hypnotic herb, which is a relaxant, it's a relaxant that helps you sleep, you are definitely not going to get the same reaction. Guys, you are definitely not going to get the same reaction as if you take ginger, which is a stimulating herb. So there's a big difference there. The last one that I want to talk about is antispasmodic or spasmolytic. They literally cause a spasm. These affect the muscles. They help muscles to relax. Now, the most common way you think about it as antispasmodic or spasmolytic is in the muscles you can see. But they can also affect the muscles you can't see. The gastric muscles, the uterine muscles, the bladder muscles. Sorry, I mixed up my words there. They can affect the heart muscles. They can affect the lung muscles. We can give an antispasmodic to somebody who's having an asthma attack. It helps relax the bronchioles. You can use an antispasmodic for somebody who's having menstrual cramps. It relaxes the uterus. You can give an antispasmodic to somebody who is having urine cramps. They get cramping because they have a urine infection and it hurts. Those kind of things. A lot, if you have gastric issues and it causes your stomach to cramp, an antispasmodic does these things as well. So it doesn't just affect the external muscles. It can also affect the internal muscles. So when you think spasm, think beyond just the ones you can see. Okay, guys, so that is what I have this week. I hope this gives you a little bit of information. I hope it helps you to understand when you look up an herbal action, what it is you're looking at. I hope you see what I see as an herbalist as to the bigger questions that we need to ask and the bigger ability that we need to give herbs in their ability to do what God asked them to do, and to soothe and to comfort and to support and to stimulate. Next time, we're going to talk about the last step, and that is energetics. That will be a fun one. So I will see you all next time. Have a good day.